Have you ever wondered why you're here, reading this, listening, reflecting, at this very moment? What if I told you it wasn't coincidence? What if something ancient within you had been orchestrating this all along, patiently waiting for the veil to lift? You see, there are no accidents in the silent journey of the psyche. There's a quiet intelligence beneath our awareness, an ancient rhythm pulling us toward truth, and now something inside you, primal, instinctual, is pressing against the fragile shell of your identity. It's whispering questions, asking you to reconsider the smile you offer so freely, the smile that feels more like an offering at a cold, indifferent altar, an altar that has never once returned the blessing. So I ask you now, not loudly, but with unwavering clarity, what happens to the empath when they stop kneeling before the comfort of others? What becomes of them when they no longer bend to soothe the world? I'll tell you, something ancient stirs. When the empath stops pleasing everyone around them, the archetype deep within begins to awaken, and it's not the persona, the carefully polished exterior shaped by childhood wounds and reinforced by years of conditioned approval, that rises. No, what awakens is far older, far more raw, the self. That forgotten core that existed long before performance, before pleasing, before pain. You see, the empath is not simply born. They are forged, not sculpted by light and joy, but carved through necessity. They emerge in environments where survival demands vigilance, where sensing the emotional weather of the room is far safer than feeling one's own heartbeat. This is the first rupture in the illusion, the realization that the gift of sensitivity was not a blessing. It was a survival mechanism. It was summoned, not gifted. It arose not in celebration of the child's spirit, but in response to silent threats and shifting shadows. A child does not become empathic because the world adored their essence. They become empathic because decoding the unsaid became essential to safety. So, when the world admires the empath's intuition, their patience, their compassion, it is often marveling at the visible remnants of an invisible wound. And that wound has a name: self-erasure. For years, maybe even decades, the empath drifts through life like a mirror without a frame, always reflecting, always absorbing, always adjusting to the light and shadows of others. They learn to attune themselves to the slightest changes in energy, a breath held too long, a quiver in the voice, the unspoken beneath the spoken. They develop what seems like a sixth sense, but it is not born of divinity, though many might believe so. It is born of trauma, a necessity learned in childhood where emotional instability was the norm and calm was only found in anticipation. When you grow up amidst unsteady emotions, you become fluent in the language of silence. You learn to detect approaching storms without a single cloud in sight. You smile even when it aches. You soothe even when you're unraveling. You serve again and again as though love could be earned through self-sacrifice. But love, true, nourishing, unwavering love, can never be bought through suffering. And the moment the empath realizes this, a quiet revolution begins. Truth, long buried, starts to stir. It begins subtly, a hesitation when saying yes again, a weariness no amount of sleep can soothe, a betrayal that cuts deep, though no one has betrayed them but themselves. Then come the dreams. The subconscious, no longer content to stay silent, begins to send messages in the form of images. The empath sees themselves drowning in endless water, running breathless through crumbling houses, chased by faceless crowds. These are not nightmares, they are metaphors. The collapsing house, the crumbling structure of a false identity, the drowning, a warning about the loss of personal boundaries. The crowd, the many masks worn for others' approval. The unconscious speaks in symbols because logic cannot reach the soul. Recognition can. And so the empath begins to ask questions they've never dared voice aloud. Who am I when no one is watching? Who am I if I am no longer needed? What remains when I stop giving? This is where the pain begins, because at first the answer is nothing, silence, emptiness, a hollow void. For someone who has built their very identity around the needs of others, the absence of that dynamic feels like annihilation, and in many ways, it is. It is the death of the false self, the unraveling of the ego that once believed love could only be earned through erasure. But hidden deep within this unraveling lies a secret, one that whispers from the heart of shadow work, if only you dare listen. The void is not the end, it is the beginning. It is not a coffin, it is a womb. The death you are experiencing is not final, it is alchemical. The empath is not being destroyed, they are being broken open. Not to be shattered, but to be reshaped by truth. To finally meet the self. Not the mass society rewards, not the performance of empathy that once kept the peace, but the original, unfiltered, unedited you, the self that existed long before the desperate need to be needed. This awakening, paradoxically, does not begin with peace. It does not begin with softness. It begins with fire. It begins with rage. Yes, rage, not compassion, not forgiveness, but unfiltered, unrelenting, undeniable rage. Because when you stop pleasing everyone, you begin to see the exploitation. You begin to see it not in theory, but with a piercing clarity that cuts through years of denial. You see how your gentleness, your quiet grace, was not honored, but used. You see how your silence was never seen as thoughtfulness, but as permission. And worst of all, you realize your presence was constantly expected, even demanded, while your own needs were quietly ignored or dismissed. It doesn't come to you like a therapist's neatly worded insight. No, it arrives like a red wave in the soul, raw, undeniable, and long overdue. It is not clinical, it is visceral, and this time you cannot look away. Do not flee from this anger that rises within you. Do not silence it. Because this anger, despite what you've been taught, is not toxic. It is sacred. It is the sacred flame that begins to sever the cords of codependency that have wrapped around you for years. It is the voice that finally says, no more. It is the emergence of a forgotten archetype within you, the warrior. And for someone who has built their entire identity around avoiding conflict and keeping the peace, this awakening can feel terrifying. Yes, the birth of boundaries feels like rebellion. It feels sharp, abrupt, even cruel. But it is not cruelty. It is not harm. It is protection. And protection in its truest form is love. It is self-love at its most primal and unapologetic expression. Here, the empath stands at the edge of their inner world and finally meets the shadow. For years, the empath has banished the shadow, cast away the anger, denied the selfish urges, repressed the hunger for more. These traits were rejected, projected, shamed, and buried deep. They were not allowed. They were feared. But now, as the act of pleasing begins to unravel, the shadow does not come to destroy. It returns to integrate. And it speaks, I am your unmet need. I am the scream you never let out. I am your stolen boundaries. I have always been waiting for you. Do not be afraid of this shadow. Be afraid of the life you lived when you ignored it. Because wholeness does not come from light alone. It comes from reclaiming every fractured piece of the self, especially the ones we were taught to hide. And the empath's journey is not just one of compassion, but of reclamation. To remember, to retrieve, to call back every fragment of the soul once left behind in pursuit of approval. Every time they said yes while their spirit cried no. Every time they swallowed their pain to make someone else comfortable. Every time they shrank themselves to make someone else feel larger. Each of those moments was a quiet soul loss. And now each of those pieces must be brought home. This is not a tidy or predictable process. It is not quick, nor is it linear. The empath will grieve not only the people they must release, but the illusion they once mistook for love. They will mourn relationships built on performance and patterns of emotional labor. They will outgrow social circles that once felt like home. They will feel lonely, not because they are unloved, but because they no longer fit the roles that once defined them. And in that aching solitude, something surprising will emerge. Stillness. For the first time, the empath stops rushing to soothe others. They are no longer reacting to every ripple of discomfort in the room. They stop absorbing, stop fixing, stop rescuing. They sit. They cry. They breathe. They listen. And in that sacred stillness, a voice begins to rise. A voice they haven't heard in years, maybe decades. Their own. At first, it trembles. It is fragile, tentative, like a child long forgotten, but it speaks with an honesty the world rarely hears. I'm tired. I don't want this. I matter. Is the return of the self. The empath begins to see not only others, but themselves. They look into the mirror and confront the true cost of always being kind. They notice the tightness in their chest, the pressure in their gut, the tears just behind their eyes that have gone unnoticed for far too long. They begin to feel again, not just for the world, but for themselves. And this is the threshold. This is the shift. Because when the empath stops pleasing everyone, they don't become selfish, they become sovereign. Sovereignty is not pride, it is not detachment. It is alignment. It is the deep understanding of where you end and where another begins. It is giving, but from fullness, not depletion. It is generosity without martyrdom. It is no longer being the dumping ground for everyone else's emotional chaos. At this point, the empath begins to attract new energies. Because their frequency has changed, they are no longer resonating with the vibrations of sacrifice and saviorhood. The narcissists, the emotional vampires, the drama addicts, they begin to fade away. And although letting go of those patterns is painful, it is also sacred. It is a clearing, a necessary release to make space for the true. But do not be deceived. This new way of being requires vigilance. The old self does not vanish quietly. It will whisper in moments of doubt. It will try to seduce you back with old comforts. The role of the wounded healer is especially seductive, especially when it comes wrapped in praise, admiration, and a sense of identity. So the empath must become something more. A mystic, a soul watcher, a fierce protector of their own energy. They must ask themselves again and again, am I giving from love or from lack? Am I serving from joy or obligation? Ember, am I truly seen or merely used? These questions are not selfish. They are sacred. They are the foundation of boundaries. Boundaries the world desperately needs, because the world does not need more burnt-out empaths. It needs awakened ones. Old ones. Empaths who can say yes with joy and no without guilt. Empaths who can love without losing themselves. I can feel deeply without being consumed. You must now understand your sensitivity is not your identity. Leave the war. It is your instrument. And like any sacred instrument, it must be tuned, protected, and honored. You are not here to carry the world. You are here to feel it, and then choose what to carry. You are not here to disappear for others' comfort. You are here to radiate your presence so fully that others remember their own. The empath who stops pleasing and starts seeing becomes something new. They are no longer merely a caretaker of others' emotional storms. They become something far more profound. They become medicine. Their presence alone begins to heal, not because they offer comfort, but because they radiate truth. And now that you have tasted the potent medicine of truth, I must offer a solemn warning. It will not let you return to ignorance. This is not a choice. It is a turning point from which there is no retreat. Once the veil has been lifted, once the psychic eye has opened and caught its own reflection in the mirror of darkness, It cannot be sewn shut again. The empath now initiated finds themselves caught in a sacred and often agonizing tension, a space between what they once were and what they are becoming. This is the liminal zone, the psychic corridor stretching between the house of false belonging and the temple of authentic being. It is not a gentle transition. It is uncomfortable, disorienting. The old roles, the comforter, the peacemaker, the ever-agreeable presence, no longer fit like they once did. And yet the new form has not fully arrived. It is still unshaped, still waiting to be embodied. You no longer crave to be the silent supporter in everyone else's story. Yet, at the same time, you have not quite found the strength to speak your full truth without trembling. This phase is what ancient alchemists referred to as nigredo, the blackening, the decomposition of the old psychic structure. It is a necessary unraveling, a collapse of persona so the soul may be reconstituted in wholeness and clarity. Do not mistake this internal chaos for failure. It is not the end. It is the beginning of true transformation. During this stage, your dreams may become more vivid, even haunting. You may see walls crumbling to dust, hands dripping blood, snakes writhing and shedding their skin in silence. These are not arbitrary symbols conjured by the unconscious. They are psychic instructions. The collapsing wall represents your old self disintegrating. The bleeding hands reveal the raw pain of relinquishing control, and the serpent, ancient and wise, symbolizes the sacred process of transmutation, the alchemy of self. This is the death of illusion so that the authentic self may be born. But make no mistake, you will be tested. The archetype of the pleaser does not vanish quietly into the night. It returns with sweet words and guilt-drenched temptations. Begin, it whispers, even if it hurts. Don't be selfish. They need you. It cloaks itself in moral high ground, insisting your value lies in sacrifice. It's your job to keep the peace, it says, weaving its old lies like comforting lullabies. But these are not virtues. They are psychic weapons, crafted by the unconscious to keep you shackled to the machinery of soul extraction. Every time you betray your truth for the comfort of others, you abandon yourself on the altar of their expectations. And such self-abandonment comes at a cost, not just emotional, but energetic. Your body begins to speak its truth. Chronic anxiety becomes the background noise of your existence. Your skin may break out unexpectedly, your digestion stumbles, your energy drains until fatigue becomes the norm. These symptoms are not random. They are not medical mysteries. They are physical protests, energetic alarms ringing out from a nervous system exhausted by over-attunement to others. Your immune system, worn thin by chronic emotional overstimulation, begins to weaken, to falter. This is the psychic bill your body presents after years of self-neglect in the name of pleasing. Yet the moment you break the cycle, the moment you choose to reclaim your energy and redirect it inward, the healing quietly begins. Slowly but steadily, the breath deepens. The jaw, clenched for years in silence, begins to relax. Your spine straightens as if remembering its original dignity. You begin to occupy your body again, to dwell within it like a sacred temple long left abandoned. Your diet changes. You no longer enter rooms trying to be liked. Instead, you arrive to be real. And this unsettles people. Why? Because you are no longer their projection. When the empath tries to please everyone, they become a psychic screen onto which others cast their wounds, their needs, their fantasies. You were the agreeable one, the dependable one, the gentle one. But when you take down that screen and stand fully in your sovereignty, those around you are forced to confront themselves, and not all will welcome this. Some may grow resentful. They may tell you that you've changed. They might label you cold, distant, selfish. Do not absorb their discomfort. It belongs to them, not to you. Their reaction is not your burden to carry. You are not here to manage their emotions. Your responsibility is to your own integrity. And this is where true transformation takes root, not merely in setting boundaries, but in holding them with consistent compassion. Even when guilt tries to creep in, even when manipulation knocks at your door, even when abandonment threatens to break your heart, Let us now descend even deeper into the archetypal core of this metamorphosis. There exists within every empath a forgotten figure, the wild self. This is not the gentle, intuitive empath the world is familiar with. No, this is a more primal force, the untamed, unapologetic, fully embodied essence of who you were before the world taught you to shrink. This is the part of you that existed before guilt was introduced, before love became a currency of approval and performance. The wild self does not please. It pulses with primal knowing, a rhythm older than memory. It moves with instinct, not instruction. It feels deeply, viscerally, but it is not ruled by the wounds of others. It does not seek permission to exist, nor does it wait for validation. It simply is, untamed, unapologetic, and alive. To awaken this part of yourself, this sacred, feral essence that remembers who you are beneath the masks, you must pass through the labyrinth of emotional and ancestral inheritance. This is no simple journey. It winds through shadows, passed down through generations, emotions long buried in silence and shame. You must ask, perhaps for the first time in your life, who taught me that love must be earned? Whose approval did I beg for as a child, hands metaphorically outstretched, heart wide open, desperate to be seen? Who benefited from my silence, my willingness to comply, my performance of a false light? These are not just personal inquiries, they are mythic, they are initiation. Because when you dare to confront these truths, you're not just healing your own story, you are dismantling an entire lineage of psychic inheritance. You're cutting the cords of generations who were told their worth depended on self-sacrifice. You're ending a spell cast long ago upon the feminine and the sensitive, a spell that said your value lies in how much of yourself you can give away. This awakening is revolutionary. It is no longer enough to be nice. Niceness, after all, is often a performance, a thin layer of socially acceptable compliance dressed up in pleasantries. It is silence painted as virtue. But what the world truly needs now is not more niceness. It is fierce empathy, grounded in unwavering truth. Empathy that includes yourself, that knows when to say yes and when to stand firmly in no. Empathy that knows where the boundary lies and holds it with love and certainty. Empathy that says, I feel you, but I will not abandon me. Can you feel the gravity of this shift? It's seismic. When the empath stops pleasing, they become something else entirely, a mirror, but not a mirror of others' fantasies or projections, a mirror of their shadows. Your refusal to self-abandon becomes the spotlight on their unconscious patterns. Your boundary calls forth their guilt. Your clarity shatters their carefully maintained chaos. And so, many will retreat. Not because you are wrong, or unkind, or broken, but because they are unprepared to meet themselves in your reflection. They cannot yet face what you so boldly reveal. But the few who stay, these are your true companions. They will not just take from you, they will see you, honor you, reciprocate. Relationships once defined by imbalance and silent suffering will either dissolve or evolve into something real, rooted, and reciprocal. Those who truly love you will adapt. Those who only needed you will quietly disappear. This is not loss, this is sorting. And in the quiet aftermath of that sorting, you will finally hear something that had long been muffled, the clear frequency of your soul. Not the static of others' needs, not the noise of their expectations, just you, your essence, your truth, your unspoken longing. This is what it means to truly see. You no longer confuse attachment with love. You no longer equate emotional intensity with connection. You recognize manipulation even when it wears the mask of dependence. You feel, perhaps for the first time, the subtle but powerful difference between authentic intimacy and emotional extraction. You see it in the eyes, in the space between words, in the energy that lingers in silence. You have become the one who sees. And this vision, it doesn't just change your personal world, it ripples outward. The empath who stops pleasing becomes a vessel, not only for personal liberation, but for collective healing. Because now, when you give, it is not from a place of emptiness, it is from alignment, from clarity, from wholeness. When you help, it is not out of fear of being unloved, it is from conscious choice. When you serve, it is not to earn love, it is from love. This is sacred service. And it has power, real power. Your aura begins to shift. You no longer magnetize the broken who seek to siphon your light. Instead, you attract those who carry their own flame, those who meet you eye to eye, soul to soul. The entire frequency of your life elevates, not through striving or proving, but through shedding. You lose the approval of many, and in its place you gain something far more valuable, the truth of yourself. Do you understand now why this path is not for the faint of heart? Why so many empaths remain imprisoned by the cycle of people-pleasing? Because to break free is to confront every illusion you've ever had about love. You must be willing to be misunderstood, to be rejected, to even stand alone for a while. But in that solitude, something beautiful happens. The soul begins to bloom. You were never meant to be everyone's soothing balm. You were meant to become your own medicine. And from that healed wholeness, you will radiate a light so honest and raw that it reminds others of their own. Not by rescuing them, not by fixing them, but by being so unapologetically yourself that they remember what it feels like to come home to their own soul. This is the empath evolved. This is you, becoming. The path you walk now is not upward but inward, downward into the fertile dark, where truth is not an idea but an experience. You are no longer here to be liked. You are here to be home. And this frightens the part of you still addicted to being chosen. That small, trembling part, the one hiding deep within your nervous system, flinches at the thought of being left out, invisible, or unworthy. Yes, addiction. Let's name it for what it truly is. This is not just a character trait. This is not kindness run amok. People-pleasing is an addiction. It is a psychological and emotional dependency, an intense craving for validation dressed as virtue. It's a silent compulsion that urges you to merge with others, to soften every edge of discomfort, to fix what isn't yours to fix. And here's the raw truth. It's not because you are inherently good. It's because you are deeply afraid. Afraid that without your usefulness, you are disposable. Afraid that if you stop performing, you will be abandoned, pushed to the margins of love and belonging. This is the wound of abandonment, cloaked cleverly in the costume of kindness. But listen closely. Beneath that costume, something begins to stir. A deeper self, a quieter truth. This self does not plead to belong. It does not beg for inclusion. It knows with unshakable certainty that it already belongs, not to someone, not to a group, but to existence itself. That realization changes everything. You were not born to fulfill others' unfinished emotional homework. You are not here to act as the patchwork for someone else's brokenness. You are not made to serve as a vessel for someone else's unresolved inner child. That is not your purpose. You are a sovereign psyche, a one-of-a-kind constellation of archetypal intelligence and timeless wisdom. You are not a solution. You are a soul. And your life? It belongs to you. The moment you realize this, not just as a concept in your mind, but as a truth in your body, is the moment you begin to reclaim your psychic throne. It's not intellectual. It's somatic. It lives in your breath, your posture, your presence. And do you know what happens when the empath finally sits on their own throne? The dynamic shifts completely. You no longer orbit around others' needs like a satellite begging for gravity. Instead, others begin to revolve around you, drawn by the sheer resonance of your authenticity. You do not manipulate, you do not demand, but your energy becomes undeniable. Authenticity has a frequency. When you stop unconsciously leaking energy through giving that drains, through rescuing that weakens, you condense that life force. You become radiant. You become magnetic, not louder, just more real. You speak from the wellspring within, and that, dear soul, is power. Not the kind that dominates, the kind that aligns. This is when you begin to understand what the mystics meant by the inner marriage, the sacred union of the anima and animus within you, the dance between the masculine and feminine, the doing and the being, the action and the surrender, the giving and the receiving. You are no longer fragmented. You no longer scan the outside world, searching for your missing half in others. Why? Because you've finally begun the long, holy work of integration. And with integration comes something sacred, discernment. You start to see clearly, sometimes startlingly so, the subtle games people play. Some do it knowingly, some unconsciously. You notice the quiet guilt trips, the smiles laced with judgment, the invisible contracts wrapped in the language of love. But you no longer absorb these tactics. You see them. You witness them with the detachment of someone who has seen behind the curtain, and you think, ah yes, I remember when I used to play that role too, when I bartered my truth just to be accepted. But you don't judge. And, more importantly, you do not join. This refusal to participate in unconscious dynamics is not cruelty. It is compassion grounded in clarity. It is fierce love that honors truth above comfort. You allow others the dignity of their own process. You do not interfere. You do not rescue. You no longer mistake helping with over-sectioning, unctioning. You hold space, but not responsibility, for the outcomes of their lives. And this, perhaps, is the most painful initiation of all for the empath. The sobering realization that healing others is not your job. Let me say that again, slowly. So your nervous system, so conditioned to act, can finally absorb it. Healing others is not your job. It never was. It may have felt like your duty. It may have become your identity, your performance, your coping mechanism. Perhaps it was your survival strategy, how you found belonging, how you stayed needed. But it was never your destiny. You were not placed on this earth to be consumed by those who don't know how to hold their own pain. You were placed here to become conscious, and through that sacred consciousness, others might remember their own light. But their awakening? That's their path, not your task. As this truth finally sinks into your bones, your entire energy field begins to change. No longer does your life force flow outward in endless rivers of overextension. It starts to pull inward, slowly, steadily, like water returning to the well. For the first time in your life, you begin to feel full. Not because someone praised you, not because you earned someone's love, but because you are present. And in that presence, in that quietfulness, you begin to create. You write, you paint, you speak, you dance, you dream. Slowly, surely, the soul that had once been muffled, suffocated, beneath the demands and expectations of others, begins to sing again. It's not a dramatic explosion of freedom. It's a quiet, steady hum that rises from the inside out. Not because someone finally gave you permission, not because the world suddenly became kinder, but because you finally chose to liberate yourself. And in that choosing, something truly beautiful begins to unfold. You notice that when you live from this place of embodied truth, the right people begin to find you, not because you're performing, not because you're bending or contorting yourself to be liked, but because you're vibrating authentic, whole, and radiant. Authenticity is the ultimate beacon. It cuts through the thick fog of codependency like a lighthouse piercing a storm. It speaks a frequency that only those attuned to honesty can hear. It doesn't shout. It resonates. And those who are ready will hear it and move toward you. And those who aren't, they will fade. This is not a loss. This is a natural pruning of your psychic garden. Some connections will rot, Others will blossom, some will ghost away in silence, and some, to your surprise, will grow deeper, richer, and more honest. Let them. Trust the innate intelligence of your transformation. Trust that not everyone is meant to walk with you beyond this threshold. Some relationships existed only to reflect back to you the unhealed version of yourself. Now that you are healing, now that you are transforming, they no longer know how to relate to you. They look at you and no longer recognize the version of you they once depended on. Do not mourn this too deeply. Instead, bless them. Thank them for the role they played in your evolution, and keep moving forward. Not out of spite, but out of alignment. Because what awaits you now is not just self-acknowledge, it is self-embodiment. You are not here merely to understand your wounds like a scholar dissecting emotion. You are here to transmute them into wisdom, into creativity, into sacred expression, into art, into service, into something meaningful and alive. You become what some might call a wounded healer, but with one essential difference. You are no longer trying to heal others to escape your own pain. You are now offering from the overflow of your wholeness. This is not martyrdom. This is mastery. You move differently through the world now. You are no longer afraid to say no. You are no longer uncomfortable in silence. You are no longer terrified of losing people, because more than anything, you are no longer afraid of losing yourself. This is the empath reborn. No longer a sponge that soaks in others' pain without filter. No longer the quiet servant, secretly suffering. No longer the invisible caretaker, constantly depleted. You are now a sovereign being. You choose connection, but only without compulsion. You give, but never from depletion. You love, but without losing your own center. Yes, you still feel deeply, but you no longer drown in it. Yes, you still care, but you do not carry what was never yours to begin with. Yes, you still help, but only when helping is sacred, not self-sacrifice disguised as virtue. In this way of being, you become the living embodiment of something deeper, something older. You become not just the empath, but the oracle, the one who feels, not to please, but to perceive, the one who serves, not to be loved, but because they are love, the one who has walked through the fire of self-erasure and emerged, glowing with discernment, with vision, and with inner power. The empath who stops pleasing and starts seeing does not lose their light. They finally learn how to aim it. And now, beloved soul, we arrive at the deepest threshold of your transformation, the sacred crossing into a new way of being. This is the moment of integration. The integration of the empath who no longer performs, but perceives, who no longer sacrifices, but stands rooted, who no longer seeks to be chosen, but chooses themselves. Not just with the eyes, not only with the heart, but with the full intelligence of the psyche, one that has been forged through shadow and flame. At this sacred stage, a profound paradox begins to reveal itself, one that only the awakened can truly hold. You begin to realize that while your suffering was not your fault, your healing is entirely your responsibility. You no longer blame the past, but you also no longer deny its fingerprints on your nervous system, your habits, your choices, your relationships. You become both the observer and the participant in your story, both witness and warrior. The empath, once shattered by trauma and forgotten by themselves, now starts to become whole, not by numbing their sensitivity, not by rejecting it, but by reclaiming its sacred purpose. You now recognize your emotional depth for what it truly is, not a burden to carry, but a compass that leads to truth. And yes, the world may still misunderstand you. They may still say, "You're too much." But those words, they no longer pierce like they used to. They inform, they reveal. Because what they're really saying is, You feel things I cannot bear to feel. You speak truths I haven't made peace with. You mirror parts of me I still don't know how to love. This is the final burden and the final blessing of the awakened empath. To become such a clear mirror that it unnerves the unconscious. But you no longer shatter at their rejection. You bow in quiet grace, because you know now not all are meant to meet you where you're going. And that, my love, is no longer your grief to carry. You were never meant to dilute yourself for the comfort of others. You were meant to be the elixir that wakes them, if they are ready. And, if they are not, you continue walking, not in resentment, not in bitterness, but in quiet reverence for your own sacred path. You do not force, you do not chase, you simply keep walking, honoring the journey that has called your soul forward. This is what individuation truly means, not separation for the sake of ego, but the holy unfolding of the self, the real self. This is what I dedicated my life to exploring, the deep and often painful process of becoming. Becoming not a persona, not a mask worn for approval, not a role inherited from family, culture, or fear, but the undivided totality of your being, the one that holds both light and shadow, both instinct and spirit, both rage and reverence, woven together in wholeness. You are no longer an empath who needs to be needed. That old identity, rooted in scarcity and survival, no longer defines you. You have outgrown it. Now you are a sovereign soul, awake and grounded, who chooses to feel. You feel not because you're obligated to heal others, but because feeling is your gift. You are no longer shackled to the psychic chains of codependent love, the kind that demands self-erasure in exchange for connection. For now, you have tasted something different. You have tasted the medicine of your own presence. And once you've known that flavor, pure, healing, whole, you can never forget it. You cannot go back. Now, you walk differently. You enter rooms with your energy intact, no longer leaking it to gain favor. You do not scan the space like a radar, anxiously reading the emotional weather of everyone around you. Instead, you remain anchored in your own atmosphere. You allow your own frequency to fill the space, and you let others adjust, not out of pride, but out of self-respect. You don't rush to fix. You don't scramble to soothe. You no longer sacrifice yourself in the name of peace. Instead, you allow others to meet their own pain face to face. You trust that their souls carry the same wisdom yours does, the wisdom to guide them through discomfort. You no longer confuse discomfort with danger. Can you feel the power in that shift? You built safety within your own nervous system, a foundation you never had before. That inner coil, once wound tightly from years of silent hypervigilance, now begins to unwind, breath by breath, step by step. You come home to yourself. You laugh more easily. You say no more quickly. You ask for what you need, clearly and without apology. You stop explaining your boundaries. You let the silence that follows speak with clarity and authority. And from that stillness, something extraordinary happens. You begin to attract what matches your vibration, not your wound. This may be the greatest miracle of all. The people who come into your life now aren't drawn to the version of you that bends, contorts, and hides. They are drawn to the real you, the one who is rooted, radiant, and resolute. The one who knows how to love without leaking. The one who gives without grasping. The one who feels deeply, but no longer drowns. The one who understands now, at a cellular level, that love is not earned through pain, it is revealed through presence. And when you meet these souls, these companions, these sacred mirrors, you recognize them not by the racing of your heart or a flood of adrenaline. You recognize them by the calm in your body. There is no anxiety in true connection, only peace, only expansion, only a deep sense of recognition, as if your soul whispers, "Yes, we remember you." And yet, even here, the work continues. Because wholeness is not a destination, it is a daily practice, a devotion. You will still feel temptation. The old rules, the old scripts, they don't vanish overnight. They will call to you like familiar ghosts in the night. You may still catch yourself nodding when you want to shake your head, giving when your body aches for rest, apologizing simply for existing. But now you catch yourself, not with shame, not with judgment, but with curiosity. You ask, who in me is speaking right now? Is it the abandoned child, still afraid of being left behind? Is it the inner savior, aching to be loved through usefulness? Is it the shadow, craving praise and permission? You do not exile these parts. You do not silence them. You invite them into your awareness, into the sacred circle of your healing. You breathe with them. You honor their origin story. And then, gently but firmly, you remind them, we do not need to do this anymore. But we are safe now. We are seen now. We belong to ourselves. This is the true liberation of the empath. Not the suppression of their sensitivity, not the extinction of their deep feeling, but the emancipation of their identity from it. You are more than what you feel. You are the one who watches the feeling. You are the one who shapes it, who channels it, who chooses what it becomes. You are the vessel, not the water. The bridge, not the burden. And from this deep place of remembrance, the empath becomes something holy. They become a psychic anchor. In a world that trembles with chaos, they offer stillness. In a world obsessed with performance, they offer truth. In a world addicted to noise, they bring us silence that heals. Their very presence disrupts the unconscious dance of dysfunction, not by force, not by confrontation, but by calibration. Others begin to regulate just by being near them, not because they were fixed, but because the empath no longer abandons themselves to soothe others. This is energetic mastery. This is the empath ascended. And so, to you, the one who has felt too much, given too much, lost too much, I offer this closing invocation. You are not broken. You are breaking open. You are not too sensitive. You are exquisitely attuned. You are not here to carry the world. You are here to embody your own. Walk on, speak true, love wisely. And please, above all else, never again abandon yourself to be loved. The soul you betray when you please everyone is your own. And the soul you recover when you begin to see. That soul is divine. That soul is